Hello everybody, this is Yasmin from Yarkspiri fantasyart.com and welcome to another illustration video tutorial. For this week's drawing I decided, because the special request was that I draw fairies in a dance scene, I wanted to base my fairies on a slightly more darkish yet also light-hearted feel. So I didn't want to make it the typical fairies that you normally see in kids' books nowadays. So I did base my fairies on Brian Froud's work because he does have a unique perspective on his designs. And for this reason, I wanted to give them an unnatural or more organic look, which is the green tone. So as you can see, I just did a super rough drawing to get the general idea of how I was actually going to paint these characters, and I already knew that my main palette for the characters would be the green color, because they're supposed to mix in with their environment. They're supposed to be an extension of that environment, which is why they're mainly drawn with browns and green colors. Now, in order to get the actual idea, I did have to do quite a few thumbnails, which I'm not currently showing you. I did a couple of studies on how I was going to go about actually drawing it once again, and I came up with this drawing. This drawing actually took about 6 hours to do, so it wasn't too long, but it also wasn't the shortest image I've worked on, mainly because it had a lot of background elements. Now, what you'll see me also use later on is I actually have a new brush that I essentially designed. It's just a flat brush. And I just made it really quickly just to try out a couple of new techniques and see if it worked and was comfortable to use. But as you can see right now, I am mainly using my default soft brush. I haven't started using that brush. You only see me use that brush once I start getting into the background elements, because I wanted the initial color palette to remain extremely rough. So I have two options. I can either use the soft brush or the hard brush, which I find more useful in that case. But for this reason, I wanted to change it up a bit. I wanted to try something new, so I used that experimental brush essentially in order to figure out whether or not I liked it. So you'll see me once I finish actually this fairy and the other secondary fairy, you'll actually see me actually using that on the background elements. Now, for this initial design, I initially was going to actually draw both these fairies in the nude, but I decided to go against it because I did want to have some foliage actually covering part of their body parts to give it a look as if they're, well, because they're an extension of the environment, that they've heavily rely on those elements to actually get all their nutrition as well as their clothing from. Because I want these fairies to be intelligent as well. So I'm giving them the option of showing that intelligence by also having some clothing elements that are unique to them. So I'm mixing in a lot of different elements to get these essentially slightly different style of fairies. Now I've just started using that flat brush I was talking about earlier, and this was super simple to make. I essentially created an image file that was 200 by 200 pixels, and then I essentially just painted in with one of my existing brushes the rough shape that I wanted before actually using that to actually paint in the elements. So once I had that rough design done on my document for the brush, I saved it as a new preset. And then I also, because I also wanted to change my current brush presets, because I wanted to reorganize them, I went to the preset manager and I was able to actually swap and move around my brushes as well. Not too many people know that they can actually move their brushes around. It is important to know that you can do that. You just have to go in your preset manager in order to actually be able to do that. Now I've just started working on the secondary character, as you can see, and I'm keeping this pretty rough because this character has a bit more lighting on her. So I'm not trying to overdo the elements at all. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible while still showing the proper anatomy and shape that goes along with the character. And some of the facial elements right now. Now, although I have both arms up right now, I decided that having both hands, given the current action pose with her legs, did not showcase the right pose for what I'm trying to go for, because obviously these characters need to look like they're actually dancing. This would make more sense if she was doing more of a ballerina type dance, but since she isn't, I actually end up moving the arm that's actually right next to her head currently to the side of her body, so it looks more like she's actually dancing as well. Now for the wings, at this point I'm keeping it extremely rough, essentially as rough as the current background is, and I'm just working out the basic color palette right now for these background elements. I already know that I want to have a fireplace in the center, so I'm playing around with some of the levels, the color balance, to figure out exactly how I'm going to go about doing that. And I'm slowly building up on more saturated areas as I'm moving closer to that fireplace area. I'm adding in some cast shadows and some extra light to show those cast shadows. I'm also modifying some of the colors so that they have more of a bluish tint. Since they're fairies, I do want them to have at least some color to them, almost like a butterfly. So I did add some additional colors to do that. Working out the rough background trees right now. So essentially these two trees are helping to frame the two characters. Now I'm obviously not copying and pasting those two trees because I don't want them to be perfectly symmetrical, but some form of symmetry is useful as long as I don't overdo it. And that's a very important thing, is I can't overdo it too much, otherwise it does show and it just doesn't look good. So I'm adding some of the background trees. Tested out a bush, didn't like it, so I removed it. I'm just going in and adding some finer details because I have quite a bit of detail in those characters, so I have to add in the right amount of detail for those trees to help balance out the entire scene. Now I'm just sampling as I go and using the soft brush to get all these elements to work, and I'm just starting to add in the clothes and hinting at these clothing elements for the fairies. So I'm not going overly detailed for these clothing elements. I'm still keeping them fairly rough. Just adding some highlight and some darkened areas and shadows. And I just added some rim light to really help make the characters pop a little bit more. Now to really showcase that that's a fireplace, I just added some logs below it. Trying to offset them just to keep them slightly irregular. And I'm working on darkening up some of those core shadow areas that would not be seen as much light. And I'm adding the smoke effects now to the fire. So these fairies are actually fairly large. They're essentially human-sized shapes. Now, depending on which folklore you're looking at, because obviously there's quite a bit of folklore, and it depends on which one you're reading, or if you're reading a modern version versus a traditional version, fairies could actually potentially be life-size versus bug-size. So in this instance, they are life-size. Adding some of the additional highlights from the fire into the tree helps tie in the elements, and I'm just starting to work on the rocks, as you can see right now. I just quickly added that in, and I'm adding some of that magic sparkle effect. I actually have a brush that does it. I do not use it very often because it's very easy to overuse it. So for this reason, I minimize its use as much as possible. Now, because I did add some of the sparkles, I also made sure to add some color to the wings to help show once again that there's energy coming out of those areas. So there's actually somewhat of an explanation as to why there's actually some magic. It also helps brighten up these characters because, like I said, I wanted them to be slightly butterfly-like, and this helped do that. So I skipped forward to the point where I already had the arm modified, and as you can see, it looks a lot better because the original position just didn't work for the entire concept. So I just moved it, painted it out, and moved it to the side. Working out some of the rough details of those rocks. And because they're in the foreground element, I have to keep as much information as sharp as possible. Because first of all, they're inorganic, and they need to have the most detail. So what I'll go in after and do is I'll add some textures to this to help add some additional detail that's not in the midground or background elements at all. You'll also notice that these rocks tend to have more of a yellowish and warmer hues in comparison to the rest of the piece. The reason why I did that, once again, is in the foreground elements, you need the highest contrast in those areas. But as you're receding backwards, there's essentially atmosphere in between each of those elements, so it's becoming less defined, and it's actually becoming more bluish in tint. So I just started adding some of those textures, and all I did for the textures is I just put it on a separate layer as, I believe, a multiply and an overlay. So I was using a combination of both of those in order to achieve this effect. So this drawing is nearly completed. There's just a bit more modifications to go. I'm just tweaking some of those rocks once again. And I'm adding some smaller ones throughout the piece as well, because it wouldn't make sense to have just the rocks in the foreground. And I'm just modifying some of those trees. If you want to have your say on what's drawn for next week's video tutorial, or have some additional questions about my drawing process, please leave a comment below. I will take the feedback you guys give me and try to answer your questions while working on next week's painting. If you want to see some of my previous works, please feel free to check out the annotations on the side of this video or visit my channel for the full playlists. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you and take care.